Hello, welcome back to this second episode in the series about the Great Law of Peace and the Peacemaker. Um, so I just wanted to share a story with you. Um, when I was younger, and I don't remember how much younger, my father brought my sister and I and my mother, we went to um, Cohoes Falls, which is in New York. Um, and that area, those waterfalls, right, they're next to a town now in upstate New York. But though that was original traditional Kanien'kehá:ka territory. And it is actually a historical landmark. It's historical in the sense that that was the place where the peacemaker convinced the Mohawk people of his message and his prophecy. Now, what's really interesting is, and I had to just relook it up, and I'm going to put an article below. This land was actually returned to the Haudenosaunee people in 2012. And I remember going to Albany, New York with my family, and my father said, "Do you want to come?" And I was young, and I said, "Nah, I'm just going to stay here. I don't want to go. I'm not really interested." And in retrospect, I regret that because that was incredibly historic. The the land that is in the area of the falls was returned and considered a historical landmark um, because of this story. So the Peacemaker, who I said in our last episode, he came and he wanted to pass on his message of peace to the warring nations who are now the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. And so he started with the Kanien'kehá:ka people. And the Kanien'kehá:ka people, they listened to his message, but they didn't believe him. They didn't want to accept what he was telling them. And so he brought them to the waterfalls, and he climbed up onto a tree and he said, "Okay." He goes, "I want you to cut down this tree." And then they said, "Okay." So they chopped down the tree while he was in it, and he fell over and into the waterfalls. They never saw him come back up, so they thought, "Oh no, he's dead." All right, so we went back to our village. The next day when they woke up, in the distance they could see a fire. It was burning, smoke, coming up. So some of the guys from the nation went out there, and when they got to the fire, it was the Peacemaker sitting there, and he had survived. And that was a message to the Kanien'kehá:ka people to say, "Oh man, this guy is real. We need to listen to his story." And my father told me this story when I was younger, and he told it again to me when we went to visit the falls. And it's interesting because this is a story that I discuss with my students often, creation stories and other stories of or historical accounts of how things came to be from many Indigenous cultures. They hold elements that of, mythical elements and supernatural things like coming back from the dead and stuff like that, that some people don't believe. But what is intriguing about a story like this is that it is part of a history. Whether that happened or not, whatever the process was to gaining this knowledge of the Great Law of Peace, it did happen. The Mohawk people joined the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and came together. And so this is a moment where history has taken place in a space that we can see as tangible, and we can continue to go there to tell those stories. It's really beautiful. And I'm always excited to share some of these small stories that I've learned over time, because without sharing stories, our history gets lost. And that's one of the things that I tell my students about when we're discussing, Indigenous histories. And I say histories because there are multiples of all the different nations. The oral languages and the storytelling is something that's so crucial. It's so important as a way of knowledge transmission and, remembering history, because these things are written down now. But every time someone tells a story, it's a little bit different. How I tell the story is the way that my father told the story, which is the way that he was told it from someone else. The details are there, but sometimes we focus on things a little bit differently. And I think that when my father was telling me the story by the waterfalls, I was imagining it in my mind, this tree falling over and this man falling. And so those details stick out in my mind when I tell the story, which would be very different than someone who perhaps never had been there. So he convinced us, and then we became a part of the Confederacy. In the next episode, I'm gonna continue this. This is gonna be a 3-parter, I think, and I'm gonna talk about the main pillars and points of the Great Law of Peace. So let's not go too much over time. Now go, and thank you guys for listening.